This podcast is a part of the More Podcast Network.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Daily Leader Podcast by Pattern Talent, where we interview great leaders and we seek to understand leadership. I'm Brad McDonald.
And I'm Taylor Jessup, and we really hope that you enjoy this episode.
And we are back, another episode of the Daily Leader. I'm super excited chatting with Elizabeth. I'm going to let Brad introduce our guest who's coming back again. We're chatting beforehand, and it was just getting me stoked because there's amazing things that's happening in her life. And man, it's just always fun to be on the Daily Leader. And plus, today, Brad really loves my shirt. He was telling me before we started how big of a fan he is of kind of the Hawaiian look that I have going on today. Brad, is there anything else you'd like our listeners to know about, my attire and how much you love my shirt?
Taylor, I think for you as a dad, that is the perfect shirt for you to be wearing.
Yeah.
I can't do anything else to intervene other than what I've already done.
I tried to buy a shirt recently. It didn't ship here. For some reason, Amazon lost it, but it said I keep my jokes in my database. Yeah. Thank you. There it is. And I really wanted to buy it. So with that, there's where you could have had your little deal, Brad. Why don't you introduce our guest again, who has so graciously come back on?
Yes, that's right. I am stoked. I'm stoked to have Elizabeth Dixon back on the Daily Leader podcast. So Elizabeth is the author of these two books that I have here, The Power of Customer Service Experience, 5 Elements to Make an Impact, and the one that we recently interviewed her on, The Strength of Purpose, a guide to knowing and living your reason for being. And this book in particular, The Strength of Purpose, Elizabeth, had a big impact on Taylor and I as we got to read it together and then had the opportunity to interview you. And in the process of that, we talked more about your career. You're doing some work with the Trilith Foundation there outside of Atlanta, which is really exciting. You're continuing to write. You're speaking as well, which is an important part of how you serve. But something else that you have going on really kind of piqued our interest. And that is that you started Slumber Sleepwear. And so as an entrepreneur, you've had several different ventures that you've participated in, but this is kind of the current thing that you're devoting your nights and your weekends to. And so Taylor and I are really curious to kind of get a behind the curtain look at everything you've been doing with Slumber Sleepwear, and just hearing your story from kind of what it's been like to start it, how you're trying to scale it, the challenges, the highs, the lows, the successes and the wins. And we're very grateful to have you back on the show again. So thank you.
Thank y'all for having me. I'm excited to talk about this because I think the entrepreneur's journey is one that has highs and lows. And I think it's relatable to all of us about just taking some risks in life and doing things that we're going to be proud to look back on when we're older.
Yeah. No, it's really well said. That is really well said. So, okay. All right. So best place to start for me is I just want to hear like the story. So can you just tell us the story behind Slumber Sleepwear, kind of how it got started, that journey, that process, where you're at currently, where you're hoping it's going to go, all those things. You're a great storyteller. So I just want to hear the story of it.
Hear the story. Okay, so it was during COVID. It's one of the little silver linings of COVID for us. And my husband and I, our routine is to have a cup of coffee together every morning. So from 6 to about 6:20, it's our time together. Sometimes we sit in silence. Sometimes we have lots to talk about. But I kept bringing up at our morning coffee time, I would talk about how I just had this tension in pajamas. Hopefully it's not too much information, but when you first have kids, you're kind of like, I don't care. And then our son was starting to get older and I was like, oof, I need to be careful about what I'm wearing around him because he's turning into this young man. And I started to think, okay, well, what did my mom wear? And she wore a muumuu. And I don't know if y'all are really familiar with muumuus, but they're kind of like really flowy, large dresses that you wouldn't be like, oh, that's flattering. It's not. And so I thought, no, like I don't want to wear a muumuu. And then I was like, and I don't want to wear like an old t-shirt. And I just so I started buying tons of pajamas because I was like, I don't want to frump out. I don't want to become old. And so I couldn't find anything that was in the middle. It was either like matronly old woman or it was like, whoa, scandalous, save that for the honeymoon. So I was like, where's the middle? And I couldn't find it for me. So my husband one morning was like, I think you just need to do it. And I was like, you think? And he's like, yeah. So I called my friend Mike. Mike's in Greenville, South Carolina. I was like, Mike, I have this idea. He's in the fashion business. I was like, I have this idea. I need you to talk me out of it because I don't have time. I have a 5 and a 7-year-old. I'm working full time, but I want to tell you my idea. And he's like, Elizabeth, you got to do it. I was like, really? He's like, yeah. He said his wife, Melissa, had similar challenges and she would love something like this. And I was like, okay. He said, this was kicker. He said, this reminds me of when Sarah called me. And I was like, oh, yeah? Who's Sarah? And he's like, don't Sarah Blakely is one of my wife's best friends. I helped her start Spanx. And I was like, whoa, like shut the front door. You just compared me calling you to Sarah Blakely calling you. Like I will run through walls right now. Are you kidding me? He's like, I'll help make some introductions for you. And I was like, I don't know what this means, but game on. So I told my husband, I was like, he told me to do it. And my husband's like, awesome. So fast forward, he introduced me to a pattern maker in South Carolina. It was on a Zoom call. It felt like Shark Tank, but this sweet man did not want to be on the video. So it was like talking to a blank room the whole time. And then I finished my pitch, and at the very end, literally, this is what happened. It was like this. It was like, I'll do it. It goes off, and I was like, I might have just joined the mafia. I'm not sure, but I think we're making forward motion. So fast forward, it took 2.5 years from that phone call until we had product in hand that we could sell. I decided to do a market test. I'm all about testing because I've learned some of my ideas are not ideas that people necessarily are going to resonate with. So I did a market test with 75 women, different stages of life, different parts of the country, and different levels of relationship with me. Sometimes our closest friends can be like, we love it. And then, so I was like, okay, I need varying levels of honesty and relationship to me. And I said, if we could get 80% highly satisfied of those 75 women, if 80% are highly satisfied, then we're going to go forward with this. And 85% were. I was like, okay, it's worth the risk, kind of measured how much are we willing to put into this. And so we placed the order. And everything's made in the US. So the factory is out of California, which I will add, that was kind of a funny story too. So I had to source fabric. When I figured out what kind of fabric I wanted, I had to source it. So I started cold calling fabric mills. And people really were not interested to talk to me at all. Because when it got to the how many yards do you want, I said 6. And they're like, 1,000? 100? And I was like, no, I just need 6 yards. I'm just prototyping. And it's like, click. I'm like, okay, so this isn't working out so well. So I told my husband, John, I was like, babe, I need your help because no one's going to send me 6 yards of fabric. And it was at that point too, I decided someday I want to start a nonprofit called 6 Yards to help entrepreneurs just get that jump start of a relationship, like a mentor, someone to help just give them their 6 yards of fabric. Because there's 6 yards of fabric sitting on the floor at some mill somewhere, but a matter of making those connections. So anyway, that's maybe when I turn 50, I'll do that. But anyway, John sourced fabric from Walmart.com. And it was not going to be the fabric that we wanted to go with, but it was good enough. We made the patterns in it, and I had 3 amazing friends. This is a call out to how amazing they were. I was like, hey, could I send you this set of pajamas? You wear it, then wash it, and then send it to the next friend. And then I'm like, hey, would you receive worn pajamas from a previous friend who you don't necessarily know, and wear it and wash it? So they were so gracious, gave me feedback. We made tweaks. to the product, and then we did the market test. One thing I learned at Chick-fil-A is you never launch something different than how you prototype it, or like the validation phase. Like, you don't make tweaks and then launch it. Like, you have to make it again before you actually go to the launch. So we made those tweaks, and then we expanded it from 3 to 75. And then that's when we decided, November of last year, we launched it to the world. And here we are now, about, what is that, 7-8 months in?
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. So all of this started with cups of coffee in the morning with your husband. Yeah, and just a dream. That's so fun. That's so fun. You are such a good storyteller. I appreciate it. I love that story. Okay, so can you help our listeners keep unpacking this? And you touched on this, but the why or the purpose behind Slumber Sleepwear is what? How do you define that for people?
Yes. So I really want to help women wake up refreshed, confident, and ready to make a difference. I think eventually we'll expand to men and maybe kids, who knows.
I'm first signing up. I'm signing up preemptively. So as soon as you go, I'll order right away.
I love it. So my brother actually bought a size up to try it. I was like, oh, it's the sweetest thing ever, because my sister-in-law kept being like, I am sleeping better than ever before. And so that's what goes to this purpose, is that in our health, in our life, when we're not resting well, whether that's just pauses throughout the day, whether that's actual sleep at night, we're not going to make an impact the way that we could when we're truly resting well. And that journey started for me. I have an Aura ring. I started tracking my sleep around the same time that we were working on Slumber. And I was overestimating my sleep. I gave myself way too much credit for how much I was actually sleeping. I'd get the kids to bed, and then I'd be like, I need to order the thing and get the Kroger groceries and have that delivered. And by the time I actually went to sleep, I was getting 6 hours. And we really need more to sleep well. So the fun thing about Slumber is it's made out of this beautiful, beautiful fabric. Again, all in the US, which most Americans actually don't care about. They don't want to pay for that. They talk about it, but they don't want to pay for that. Yeah, they're like, yeah, whatever. China is great. It's great. But it's made from this fabric, and we designed it really intentionally that it moves with you. So you don't get all twisted up, you don't get hot, it's cooling. All these intentional elements, which I'd like to take credit for, but it truly was by the grace of God, because I knew nothing about fashion or retail or any of those things. But that's what we want to do. We want to help women to wake up feeling refreshed and confident and ready to make a difference with their lives, whether they have a job inside, outside, all around the home, whatever they're giving their life to. We want to help them feel refreshed, confident, and ready to make a difference.
I love that. I love that. I think being able to have that why is so important, and it's clear that you're passionate about it, right? So, you can go to read Simon Sinek's, like, talking about the why, right? Starts why. You can go on, and there's what is the TED Talk? Is that what it's called? It starts with why as well. It was just fantastic about that. So for our listeners, having a really clear why is super important. And I love that. I've been told, if you're not rested, you're not ready. And I kind of like that. Like, if you're not rested, you're not ready. And I can speak to that at the moment. I'm not rested. And most days with my twins right now, I wake up going, I don't know that I'm ready for the day. But you look at professional athletes, right? And they got to be at the top of their game. So they're not skimping on their sleep. And I know what it's like to be wearing some clothes that are not comfortable, right? And get in there. It's just kind of just a little bit annoying, but a little bit annoying can do a lot of bit of damage to that sleep. So that's awesome. So so Slumber Sleepwear, you got rocking and rolling now. For you, what does success look like?
So success, and I think this is such an important question for all of us, because I think the way we define success is everything. So success for me, and I think it can be iterative, but success for me was trying. Like, that was success. John and I decided on an amount of money that would be worth it to put in. And if it didn't make a return, if it didn't even pay itself back, we'd say that was worth it, because success was trying. It was going through the process. In our family, there's kind of a joke that is very true. a joke, but it's not really a joke. Anyway, when something doesn't go well, it doesn't end up the way that you hoped. My dad's first comment is it sounds like you just got your master's degree in that. Like there is an education that comes with everything we try and do. And when we're thinking about college or an executive MBA or a certification, we're paying money to get that education. Life brings education too. So my husband and I said, this is what the Elizabeth's education of starting a retail brand will be. So success was trying. I think you get there and then you redefine success and you're like, okay, we did that. Now what is it? Now how do we grow? And I think seeing life more as an iterative process than it's just like it's this one destination, and if I don't get there I fail, that I think has a potential to, it holds me back, because when success is something that's so big and so hairy and so audacious that it feels so overwhelming for how can I actually get to that within the next day, week, month, or year, that it's like, I'm probably not going to try. So success was just doing it, starting it, launching it, making it accessible online. And then now it's thinking about, okay, we have a viable product. For entrepreneurs, I think there's about 4 stages. It's like you have a viable product, check. We have a viable business, then you get that check. Then do we have a sustainable business? Like it was viable, like it could live, but can we sustain it? And then can you scale it? And that's where the big greats of the world we look at and we're like, wow, not only was it a product that worked and the business could work and it could sustain itself over time, but it was actually able to scale. So I think those are kind of part of the phases of what success can look like from a business standpoint.
Yeah, no, that's super powerful. I think the idea of success being, having different iterations of success based on your season is really important. Like if you can break that down, I think that's a great thought. And you made it really clear, right? All right, so this is our season of success is, hey, we're just going to try. And we have this dollar amount that we're willing to invest. This is what we need back so we can know and we can kind of judge it based on that. And then when you get to that point, right, you get to your waymaker, you make it to the next port, you're doing whatever, you kind of pull in, you reevaluate and you go, okay, well, what does success look like now? Because that's different. I know, at least for me, I can get overwhelmed in my endeavors by going, God, the benchmark that I see for success is X, is Simon Sinek, is, Steve Jobs, is all the things that are thrown in our face, the overnight ideas that, that people are like, oh, you can make $1 million in a year doing this on Instagram with these 3 tips. And I'm like, God, that's what I want. But truthfully, when I set my success as that, even though it's great to have lofty goals, I'm just more overwhelmed than anything.
Yes.
And then I just don't typically start. I'm like, well, wow.
Wah, wah. So Taylor, you're going to love this. My golf coach gave me a tip on that, and I think you'll relate to this. We were putting and he said, when you're stepping up to putt the ball, what is the goal? And I immediately said, make it in the hole. And he said, no, it's to make your next putt easier. And I thought, wow, like that totally changed thinking about golf, but also in life. Of every shot you take, the objective is to make the next one easier. When success is hole in one, just make it in the hole, it changes things. But when we can, okay, loosen up, let's just make the next shot a little bit easier. It's like, I can do that. And then when you get to that next shot, when it's in business, you get to evaluate, like, what's the emotional requirement for me to do this? What's the psychological consequence for me doing this? What's the financial? What's the time? Like, we have to evaluate all the things and go, okay, so then what does success look like for this next step in the process?
I love that. Just getting a little bit closer. Let's just make the next step a little easier, break it down. How do you, the old cliche, how do you eat an elephant? Well, one bite at a time.
One bite at a time.
Right.
Yes. Because we don't want to, you can't do it. And you'll step away and be hungry. It's like, don't fail because you don't try.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. That's an encouraging word. That's encouraging for me. I love that. Thank you.
Elizabeth, one of the things I've really enjoyed about our last podcast, and even as we were kind of warming up and getting situated for this one, is you talking about some of the relationships that have influenced you. And I'm curious, especially as it relates to slumber, who are some of the people who have been the most inspiring to you as you've launched this brand?
Mm. Well, John, my husband, numero uno, my fabric sourcer, my go for it babe, the one that is he's my strong and steady. I think there's a song about that, but he's my strong and steady for sure. So definitely John. Mike, who, gave me that wind of enthusiasm of like, well, maybe there's a there, and then introduced me to the pattern makers and got the process starting for me. Ansley and David, so they're our kiddos. They're 9 and 10 now. And it has been so fun to be a part of this with them. Ansley's at every pop up shop. I incentivized her. I told her she could make 10% of sales. And that girl, she went door to door in our neighborhood. I was so inside embarrassed because I was like, this is not Girl Scout cookie prices. She's going door to door with a tank top in her hand. But she was like, I can make 10%. I'm going. I was like, girl, I love you and you're going to be a world changer. Um, in the process, there are two folks, Nate Checketts, who started Roan, the men's clothing wear line, and then Emmy Howard, who's the president of Onward Reserve. Both of them have given me great wisdom and insight. And before we take a step, they help give thoughts. Nate was saying, Elizabeth, have you built into your financial model distribution? And I was like, well, I was thinking I'd do it from my garage. And he's like, no, don't do that. You need a distribution center. And if you don't use a distribution center, you have to build it into your costs because that's not sustainable. You got to start in a place where you ultimately want to end up. So they've been huge. And then I've had friends. I have my friend Hannah. She's been at almost all the pop-ups. She went to the factory with me out in California. My sister-in-law Katie went to the factory with me, helped me pick out the colors. It's really sweet when you have those people in your life that they have nothing to gain. They just care, and there's joy in getting to be a part of this process together. And then my friend Beth, she bought Slumber for herself, her friends as Christmas gifts. And I'll just never forget, she was one of those first purchasers and she believed in it so much. And I think she's purchased like 7 sets. And so those kind of people in your life, you're like, thank you. You didn't have to do that, but you chose to believe in me and believe in it. And you just never forget those people.
That's so good. And so you mentioned this a little bit with your daughter Ansley. How else have you been able to involve your family in this process?
So in our family, every big decision starts with a bowl of ice cream around the table at a family meeting. John and I decided we wanted all big decisions to have like an element of fun. So we incorporate sugar into it. And then we talk about any big decision because we want them to understand trade-offs and we want them to be a part of input giving to the trade-offs that we have to make. And so when we started Slumber, that was one of the things, and with both books, mommy's going to have to wake up early on Saturdays and hopefully it'll be while you're sleeping. But are you okay with that? Because we want to all be on the same page. So when we started Slumber, we had a family meeting and it was so cute because both of them perked up in a different way. And it was like there was a new opportunity for them in it. And they said, well, what jobs can we have? We're like, oh, interesting. And so we asked our 10-year-old, he was 7 at the time, like, what are you interested in? And he said, well, I really want to help think about the money and making sure we have more coming in than going out. We're like, okay, that's quite impressive. We want that too. Yeah. And then
I'm also hiring if he's looking. I need some help with that too.
We said, okay, you could be junior CFO is the title we gave him. And then our daughter, she said, I want to think about the designs and the patterns and the colors and the slogans. Y'all, she is gifted. She woke up one morning, came down, she had 7 different slogans for Slumber and she'd drawn out the logo and everything. I said, when did you do that? She said, oh, well, when I think my best after 9 p.m. I was like, what? I'm like an old lady going to bed at 8 o'clock. And it's just like their natural giftings have gotten to come out in ways. So involving them in what we talk about, but then also giving them actual jobs. And so our junior CFO and our junior CMO are what their roles are. And then Ansley comes to the pop-up shops and loves to sell, and she does a great job at it. And, we'll see what the future holds, but it's fun for them to be engaged in it for sure.
No, that's so cool. It's wonderful how you have integrated your family, and incredible to see how often I think our kids can step up way more than we ever thought.
It's shocking.
You know?
Yes, it's so shocking. We said when they were young, especially with helping around the kitchen, it is way messier to let them help when they're little. But it's interesting because when they get to help when they want to help, they end up being more helpful as people. But it's easy to be like, oh no, don't do that. That'll be too messy. We're like, no, we got them these little plastic cutting knives so they could safely feel like they're contributing. I think deep inside, we all really want to contribute, but we have to make sure we're putting that in front of them to give them that opportunity to feel what it feels like when you get to make something, do something, impact something.
Yeah, heck yeah. Yeah. And I am a very new parent. So this is, exciting for me to see an example of you bringing your kids into that. I just saw a video on Instagram recently, and we could get lost in a rabbit hole here, I'm sure, which I love doing, but Brad will kindly probably bring me back to topic. But it was just this interesting idea of this Instagram video of like not solving all of your kids' problems for them, like
So
allowing
good.
them to solve it. And it was equating solving problems with actually taking away their confidence when you solve it for them too much, because they don't have that opportunity to build confidence by learning that they can actually solve problems. And you kind of actually gave them a couple problems, challenges, however you want to, and you invited them into that, and then they solved that. They came back and gave you like actually pretty incredible stuff.
We could do a whole nother podcast on all my mistakes too, by the way. That just might be one thing that was okay. Yeah.
I'm 3.5 months in, and I have plenty of mistakes as well. So, and I'm not parenting. We're just keeping these little girls alive. So,
I would say you're succeeding for sure.
all right. So I'm going to pivot. I'm going to pivot just a little bit, and I want to know from an entrepreneur standpoint. I have this song playing in my head. It's the old song Chumbawamba. If you ever heard it, I get knocked down, but I get up again. Yeah, you're never going to keep me down. So could you, for our potential entrepreneurs out there, kind of talk about when you've been going through this whole process, like what has been the most challenging part for you? What has been the part that you're like, God, that maybe knocked me down a couple times, maybe it's a specific instance, or some other things that were just like, man, that was hard.
Mm. I've seen it on Instagram before where there is this entrepreneur's journey visual where the highs and the lows. It's so true. Because there's just moments where you're like, what am I doing? Why did I sign up for this? I chose this. Am I crazy? Have I lost my mind? Like all of those negative moments happen. And I think there's a great quote that someone said very wisely of every overnight success is 20 years in the making. And I think one of the hard things is time. Like a lot of things take time. One of my mentors, I texted like, what am I not doing in marketing? What do I need to do better in social media? All of this stuff. And he's kind of like, whoa, what's at the heart of this? I'm like, I feel like I need to be farther along. Very self-imposed. And his response back was so great. He said, all great things take time. And I think there's something in that. Like, you don't eat the fruit of what you just planted the seed for. Like, planting the seed, sowing, and reaping are in different seasons. And I think it can be easy. Maybe it's my personality. I don't know. But it's like, let's go and let's do it big and let's have it like, let's be the overnight success 1 year in the making. Not even that. Let's be 6 months in the making. And it's like, no, a lot of things, great things take time. I think part of it is because of what it grows in us. I think part of it is what it actually grows in the business. And slow success builds character. Quick success builds ego. My dad was a stockbroker in New York, and he said, Elizabeth, it was so interesting because the most successful stockbrokers were the ones that had the hardest time in the beginning because they had to grind. They had to work so hard. They had to make all the cold calls. They had to do all the work. But what they learned through it was they could do it. And what happened was the guys that got it really quick and it was really fast success, they became very confident. And when a hard season came, they didn't have that foundation that they could go back to have the confidence that I could grind like that again if I had to. And so I think the time that it can take of just repeatedly planting the seeds, knowing that you're going to reap what you sow, you're going to reap more than you sow, you're going to reap it for longer than you sow it, but it's still going to take time and to have that endurance to make it through. I think Warren Buffett, I saw a quote from him the other day, and it said something to the effect of basically it will, entrepreneurs won't give 3 years to see if their business will truly be successful, but they'll give 40 years of their career to another company. I've totally botched it, but I think it's just this point of it takes time. Usain Bolt has a great quote about that, of saying like it took him 4 years to train for running 9 seconds, I think it was, or 7 seconds, but most of us will give up after a few months. So that I think can be one of the hardest things, because you see where you could go, you see the iterative steps of success to get there, but it just takes the daily grind of waking up each morning and going, you know what? Success for me today might be making 5 more phone calls, or it's posting 3 more times, or it's, whatever it is that's that next step. And I think it's also measuring inputs, not outputs. When we measure the inputs of what we're doing, opposed to just the outputs, it helps us keep our eye on the ball where we are right now. But it's really easy to measure it in sales instead of measuring it in social media posts, to measure it in revenue instead of measuring it in how many wholesale partners that we called today. And that's big for our family. We're really big on measure the effort, not the result. Measure trying out for the team, not making the team. Measure going for it, auditioning, not necessarily getting the part. And we actually go out for treats and celebrate for the trying, not the making. Because I think that's a lot of times in life we get afraid of trying because we've had enough not making it, when it's like, nah, but life is in the trying. We just got to keep going for it.
Elizabeth, I have a mentor who one time was having a conversation with me around how impatient I was being about something in particular. And she said, Brad, how long does it take to grow a radish? And I obviously have no idea how long it takes to grow a radish. Yeah, it's like a couple weeks. It's like 5 weeks, let's say, to grow a radish. And she was like, if you want radishes, you can have a radish in like a month. But she was like, well, let me ask you something. Can you live off radishes, just eating radishes? My answer was like, well, probably not. And she's like, well, if you have to, you could, right? But who wants to? Who wants to live off of eating radishes? Is a horrible way to diet. And the point being, like, just what you said, like all good things, rich, enduring, meaningful, purposeful things, they just require so much time to transform into the goodness that we hope they'll become. And what we have to challenge ourselves to do is to not only be patient, because patience is actually relatively easy depending on the issue, but being resilient in that patience, continuing to maintain that same level of effort on day 100 as you had on day 50, on day 25, on day 1. Like, man, that is really what makes successful leaders, and I think entrepreneurs especially, different.
Yes, I completely agree. I've thought in this process, it reminds me a lot of surfing, that you have to know the fundamentals about how to get up on the board, how to steer the board, how to balance on the board. You have to know all that, but you're not in control of the waves. You're not in control of when the set's going to come. But if the set comes and you don't know what in the world you're doing, you won't be surfing. You'll be falling off that board. So it's like doing the diligence of practicing, no matter the size of the wave, paddle, 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 push up, stand, like knowing how to do it. I tell John all the time that you never know in business when that big wave is going to come, but you want to be ready for it. And it's having that daily diligence of doing the practice, doing the dark work, doing the hard work that nobody sees. So if that wave, when that wave comes, you know what to do, and you'll probably be incredibly nervous and overwhelmed, like, oh my goodness, this wave is coming, but you're like, I know what to do. I know how to stay on this board.
Yeah. Yeah. And even, I would say, even the kindness to yourself for the days when you don't have the same effort that you had on day one. Right. Like I don't know if you guys are in that same boat, but I know that my effort, as much as I'd like to say it's 70 to 100% all the time, I have days where I get there and I'm like, I think I gave about a 4. And, you know, and the temptation can be kind of go into this woe is me, dang it, I'm only giving now, I'm not giving enough, rather than like, okay, you know what, today I give a 4, but tomorrow I have the opportunity to get back to what I was doing, or the next day I have the opportunity. Always, you always have that. I just think it's really hard in the current society, not that it wasn't before, but we are flooded all the time with success. I just saw on LinkedIn, we keep going to all of our social media stuff, on LinkedIn, Ed Sheeran talking on somebody's it was interviewing him, and they played his song that he wrote, and he's like, yeah, I wrote this when I was 16, and it's terrible. Like, you're listening to it and his face is just like, oh, it's like painful to hear. And he's like, he's 16, and he's like, 3 years later, or 14 when he wrote it, I guess. I think he says 4 years later I came out with the song 18, which ends up being a huge success. And Ed Sheeran's incredible. You listen to his voice, like, dude's fantastic. And he goes, in 4 years, I listened how to harmonize. I worked on how to harmonize. I worked on how to write a song. I got all this melody, and go, look at what you can do in 4 years. Like, in 4 years. The problem is we see all the time these overnight success stories and all these kind of things. And at least if our listeners are anything like me, I love the quick wins. The quick wins feel really good. They put a little bit of wind in your sail. It's like, I heard somebody say, and this is botching it too, but do you want to be a dandelion and sprout up overnight, or an oak tree and be there for a long time? The dandelion grows without anything really taking care of it. It's there. It almost even looks pretty, but it's not sustainable. We know that you can pluck it out of the ground and blow it, and it's going to be done. But the oak tree actually takes a lot of work and time and effort. And there's literally nothing it's like weight training. There's nothing that replaces time over tension. Literally nothing.
Yes. Yes.
So I think that's a great point, that if you are an entrepreneur and you're listening to this, or wherever you are in your career, like, don't quit. Like, keep putting in the work. Actually, there may be times, I'm going to backpedal on that. Brad asked me once at a job, he's like, is it time to quit? Sometimes it is time to quit and go to the next thing, which we talked about, right, on your podcast last time. Maybe it's time to go to something else, but make that choice based on, hey, is that leading you towards your purpose and where you want to go? And don't just give up because it's not an overnight success.
Or because you're afraid. Yes. Because forward is forward, whether it's 4% or 94%, it's forward motion. And it's moving, and forward is good. And it's okay when it's not 100%. That's not realistic to always be at 100%. But keep moving, taking those positive steps forward.
Love that. All right. So that was challenge. Fantastic. Challenge is super good. Challenge on that side is don't quit, stay in it. It's taken way longer than you think it would. What has been the most rewarding? Like, you've thought about it and you're like, man, this has just been fantastic about starting Slumber Sleepwear.
Oh, I mean, I think intrinsically, like you were talking about as a child, when you get to do something and use your mind in a way, it's very validating and confidence building. It's intrinsically, for me, it's been really fun to step into an industry I knew very little about and navigate through it to the point where we have a product and an online presence, and we have wholesale partners and all of those things. It's really fun. There's a book, I haven't read the whole thing, but I just love the title of it. Everything is figure outable. And I think it can be really true in life, that You can figure stuff out. You can go learn. You can get a degree in something. You can go do that. So I think inside for me, it's been fun to do. I love hard things. I love hard stuff. In my life, though, getting to do a lot of it with Ansley and as a family, with John and David, is so fun and so rewarding because I believe it will be something that they get to look back on, and they're going to have so much life experience at a really young age, which I think is really, really fun. And then from a consumer standpoint, the ladies who have it, like they say that's all they sleep in which I'm like, do you know how many nights there are a week? You need a lot of sets. But we're working on that. We have 2 new colors coming out this fall because I've learned a lot of times I don't do this. I don't buy the exact same thing 5 times. Like I want a new color or a new style or a different design or something. So fashion is an interesting industry where you have to keep keeping up. There's a new color, there's a new trend, there's a new something coming out. You can't become complacent. So I think from a customer standpoint, it's most rewarding that they are getting to live out that purpose that we have of helping women feel refreshed, confident, and ready to make their impact and make a difference on the world. And that's super fun to me.
Love that. Love that. That's powerful. Yeah. When you get to help solve, um, this title is going to be real controversial for our audience, but it's the subtle art of not giving an F. I don't know if you've ever read this book, but I really enjoyed the book. And one of the things that he made really clear is, hey, life is about solving problems, and the goal is to figure out which problems you want to solve.
Yes.
And I like that. And I think that there's so much purpose in our lives of solving problems and realizing, hey, life isn't about escaping those problems. Life is about figuring out which set of problems in life do you want to solve, because there are problems and you found a problem and you're solving it. And that's life giving. And I love that.
Yes. We're not going to let women look frumpy as they get older. Fight the frump.
I need it too. I got the dad bod rocking right now, so I may take your brother's advice and order some for myself, just in a little bigger size. I might try that.
Elizabeth, I'm curious how, like, as you and John were kind of doling out that budget and writing those checks and watching that money leave your savings, or you're adding it to credit card, however you were handling that, right? And I know, especially early stage entrepreneurship, it's a mess. It's just your finances get out of whack, things feel terrible. How did you determine that this was going to be a viable business opportunity? And maybe even, have you determined that yet? Are you still in the process of being like, I don't know if this is going to go? Like, where are you guys at in that process of viability? It's standing on its own 2 feet. This is, we're going to keep doing this for the long term.
Yeah. Well, when we did the market test, we quantified, okay, this is what it's going to cost to make product, 75 sets of product. And it was worth that. I used some of my speaking money and said, okay, I'm going to set this aside, reinvest. Instead of reinvesting it into speaking or writing a book, I'm going to reinvest it into this idea. I'm going to take a bet on myself. We're really big and like, it's worth taking some bets on ourselves sometimes. So we were testing, is it a viable product at the time? And the feedback from the market test was, yes, it's a viable product. So then we moved on to, is it a viable business? And I think we're between, is it a viable and is it a sustainable business? Granted, I'm spending a fraction of my week because the majority of my time is with Trilith Foundation and being a wife and a mom. So it's getting a little sliver of my time, but it is in that season of going, okay, is this a viable business and can we make it a sustainable business with the current leadership, or is it going to need new leadership, whether it's from a skill and capability standpoint or it's from a time resource standpoint, because I need to give my time to other places. And I think we're testing that out. It's been interesting because then the next question, at least in my mind, comes, so when will you know? Like, how long will you go? We've said 3 years is the time frame that we feel like is the amount of time to hang on, because when we have asked most entrepreneurs, how long did it take to become sustainable? They say 5 years. Somewhere around 3 to 5 years. And I don't know quite what the magic is in that, but I actually had one of those trough bottom moments the other day. I was in the Chick-fil-A drive-thru getting a Diet Sunjoy to just kind of perk up my day. And I called my dad, and I was kind of in the, why am I doing this phase? And he reminded me when he started his aviation company, Simcom, they had 55 customers the first year. When he sold it, they had 10,000. And it just really put in perspective for me of like, that's right, 55. And I could almost imagine my dad, like you could name off 55 people. Where we are with our customer base of Slumber, I can go down the list, and some of them I know, some of them I don't know. I've written handwritten notes to all of them because I'm like, I want to do what I can do while we're small that I wouldn't necessarily be able to do when we're larger. So we've said, I think 3 years is that amount of time that we want to stick in it. Could a life change happen that causes that to go different? For sure. Something can happen. I think we always have to reevaluate our priorities in line with our purpose and the season of life that we're in.
Yeah.
But we're in that phase of like, is this sustainable? Is this something that can last longer and actually really grow into something bigger? We'll find out.
You made a subtle distinction that I want to highlight because I'm sure you have some interesting thoughts around it. You said you determined it was a viable product, but you weren't sure that it was going to be a viable business. And now you've kind of said, okay, this is a viable business. Well, what's the difference between a viable product and a viable business from your perspective?
From my perspective, let's take retail. I have only started service-based companies and real estate companies up until now. And those are very different because the service exchange, it's easier to project, and there's less financial commitment up front for those. If you're going to have me come speak, I can quantify my travel. A lot of what I'm being paid for is my time. A product, you have to have inventory. You have to have a distribution center. So you're putting in these disproportionate investments, believing that they're going to pay off over time. So with that, the viable product to a viable business in retail for me is, okay, this is the expense to make the product, and this is what all the elements are going to cost for that particular product. But there's also all the expenses related to social media and paid ads and, getting a social media manager to be able to run all of that. I didn't build in all of these marketing related costs into the cost of the product because I believe that that's just where some of my profit margin is going to have to go. So the product is viable. People will pay that amount for that product. It works, it fits, they love it. But is it something that can be a viable business where I can hold all of these other expenses and sell enough to be able to pay for all of those expenses every month? That's the viable business. I think where it goes to sustainable business is where it's like, of course you can pay for all those, and you're able to bring on more overhead and more people to sustain with all of those trends over time. New products. I mean, brands now, they're saying they release new product. I think it's every 3 weeks.
Wow.
That's crazy.
It takes me a year to go from a concept to rolling out the actual product. So when you think about these big brands like Lululemon and Viore and others that are amazing, you're like, they have serious overhead. And then I think that's where you get to more of the, is this scalable? Can we scale this business? And ultimately for some entrepreneurs, be able to sell it for a multiple of its earnings.
Yeah. Dang.
That's really good. I'm curious along those lines, any quick thoughts on what mindset shifts you've had to make as you've grown into this new kind of role, this new kind of business that's, not something you've done in the past. It's a product-based business. It's direct to consumer. It's primarily online and pop-ups.
Yes.
What are some of those mindset shifts?
Part of it's the mindset shift of defining success very clearly up front. So for us first, it was launching, right? But recognizing that there is going to be an exponent of time that is going to have to be true. And am I willing am I doing this for the long term? Can I make that mindset shift more for a length of time? I think the other one is choosing curiosity over personalizing things, because when you're a founder, you've put a lot of heart and a lot of emotion into the process. And so you have this product or thing. And the worst thing you can do is plug your ears to feedback. But the most uncomfortable thing you can do is be like, do you like my baby? Do you think my baby's pretty? What do you not like about my baby? And so I think choosing curiosity. I was somewhere the other day and some ladies were asking me about slumber, and I pulled up the website. Some of this is just a discipline. I pulled up the website and I said, "Hey, check out the website. What does it make you feel? What do you think when you see this? What do you think of that color?" Like being curious as though it was somebody else's brand and I had an emotional unattachment to it, to just be curious. What do you think? What do you like? What do you not like? What would you want to see instead? What did it make you feel? And asking the same of our customers. What do you think about it? How did you like that product? What else do you want to see? I do little survey monkeys all the time of, I'm thinking about these 4 colors. Which one do you like? Which of these products would you like? It's amazing. One of my favorite products that I want to make, nobody wanted. And I was like, okay, well, we're not doing that one anytime soon. But being curious instead of personalizing it and making it feel, you know, personal, because it is personal, but it's also business. And so being able to just keep that curious perspective. And I think also like not despising humble beginnings. Forward motion is forward motion. So for a while, I kept the product in these Chipotle catering boxes. Chipotle boxes and Chick-fil-A fry boxes are like the best boxes ever. They're super stable. And so there were plenty of times going into a pop-up shop where I'm just straight up embarrassed. I'm walking in with 2 Chipotle catering boxes and they're like, sweet beans and rice. And you're like, or Slumber Sleepwear. It's cool. I just am using a Chipotle box. But it's kind of like, you know what? For me to spend a lot of money on boxes is money that I'm taking away from reinvesting back directly towards the customer. So it's okay to feel uncomfortable. It's okay to feel like I have an adult lemonade stand sometimes and that I'm, selling this product. And the lesson that I'm getting to teach Ansley in that process is so good. And I'll be honest, there's times where I want to qualify it. Oh, well, I'm actually CEO of Trilith Foundation. I'm actually an author and a writer, but I just happen to be here today selling this stuff. It's like, absolutely not. No, ma'am. Like, I am just here to sell slumber, and I don't need to care what people think. I'm just going to make forward motion and take one more step forward. And so you look back on the greats. Phil Knight sold Nikes out of his trunk. Sarah Blakely walked around the Atlanta airport selling Spanx to people. So forward motion is forward motion, but it takes a mindset shift to be like, it's okay to constantly be a student. It's okay, because that's where you grow. That's how you move forward. But it does take a mindset shift to go, I'm going to be a student in this space. I might be a decent, knowledgeable professional in other spaces, but I'm going to start in humble beginnings as a student in this one.
That's good. Yeah.
What we say all the time is that anything worth doing is worth doing poorly at first. And I think especially for emerging leaders, emerging entrepreneurs who are really giving it a go, especially for the first time, need permission to really just suck at first and not feel like they have to be the Kobe Bryant of their space right away.
Yes. If Ed Sheeran never wrote that song at 16, we wouldn't get to hear him now. And I think it's refreshing to see the early days for everybody. And so today's an early day for somebody.
Yeah, that's right. I wish I had this clip of so my basketball team has like the best player in the world, Nikola Jokic, and he does not look like an athlete at all. Dude is 7 feet, gangly looking, you would never guess. And they asked him like, how did you get successful? He goes, well, you have to suck for a while, and then you try and you get good, and then you suck again, and then you try some more things, and then you suck again, and then eventually you get better, and then you suck some more, and then that's how you get to success. And like that was basically his answer, paraphrased. But the only way to is through, and you have to be willing to not be good at something in order to get good at it.
Yes. The master has failed more than the beginner has tried. Like, we have to be willing to just try. And I don't think any of us like to suck at stuff. But when we can get over the hump, it's awful, right? But if it's framed in like success is trying, success is going, success is showing up, success is shooting the shot, then if you keep doing it long enough, you're probably going to get pretty good at it.
Yeah. Can we be brave enough just to try?
You guys will love this. I got a text from a client about an hour ago that said, "Ha ha ha, this is so bad. Just going to keep stepping." And he's referring to a big career change and a new role, and he's over marketing at a company, and it's rough right now, right? And I love those text messages because this is like everything we've been working towards for the last 9 months is this moment for him to step into something that is so seemingly uh, beyond what he's capable of. But I think obviously what you've just demonstrated with your story is actually you can learn things. Actually, you can grow. Actually, you can rise to an occasion. And so, Taylor, I know you're going to land our plane here. I wanted to share that because it's such a good real life example.
Yeah, no, it's perfect. It's perfect. And the truth is, I'm going to suck at this for now. That's all it is. It's just for now. For now, I'm going to suck at this. So, all right, Elizabeth, question here. And we kind of do this practicality corner. I want like a little guy that jumps into my hand, like a little graphic. That's our little practicality corner guy that just because we just want to give, don't do that, Brad. Don't squash my dreams for our practicality corner. There's a little jingle that's happening right now.
I was going to say you need a jingle.
I know it happens. They'll put it in. It is on the when you go back and watch. It'll be on the final recording. I wish we could hear it now. We need someday we'll have John in the back that'll like look up stats for us and play our jingles. We're not there yet. So, but really practically, what I'd love to know, because Brad and I have this conversation actually about the podcast recently. What would you go back and do differently if you relaunched Slumber Sleepwear? Like, what are some things that you learned that you're like, man, I might go back and I would do this different?
I would order more colors. That's definitely something that I've learned. I had to take a bet on two, but I think I would take the same order size and I would distribute it across more colors because I think I would learn a lot about people's preferences. The other day, I was with some girlfriends at the pool and I was like, "So would you wear red pajamas?" And they're like, "No, definitely never red." And then just a little bit later, they're like, "Unless it's Christmas. Like if it was like October, November, I'd totally buy red. Or maybe Valentine's. I guess I'd buy them in like February." And I'm like, "Yeah, yep, that's it right there. We live seasonally as consumers, and colors jump out at us in season." And so I
And
think
that is
I
especially true of women, in my opinion. Women are very attuned to what is appropriate for what time of the year with how they dress. Whereas, I mean, look at Taylor. I mean,
Hey, this is very appropriate. Yeah, I'm going to Hawaii. And Brad, for our listeners on iHeartRadio, they don't know that I'm wearing this nice Hawaiian shirt, that's got some great colors in it, some greens, and it's very festive and it's summery. So I'm dressing for summer, Brad.
It's awesome. And shout out to Bad Birdie Golf, who has created a great brand that we should all support.
Special shout out to Jason, Brad. Shame on you, Brad, for hating on my outfit.
so along those lines, more colors. So that's a product. That's kind of you would approach your product with a little bit more variety. What else? That's a really good one. I like that, how tactical that is.
What would I do differently? I'm telling you guys, mentors save you so much pain. If I take out the decisions that we made that were made because of Nate or Emmy or Mike, then I'd have a long list. I would have had a distribution partner instead of trying to do it myself. I would have done 4 products instead of 2. I wasn't going to launch with pants, but I had a customer, a good friend of mine, say, "You have to have a pant option." So many of the things that I am thankful to look back and say, we did it because of the feedback, because of the advice, because of that mentorship. I would have a long list if it weren't for Nate, Mike, and Emmy. So I think that's the big thing. It's like mentors in your life will save you a lot of time, a lot of heartache, and a lot of times a lot of money too.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. You found out what the consumers kind of want, right? And trying to give them what meets their wants and needs and desires. And then find people that will help you along the way, save you from going into whatever potholes or, whatever, whatever mistakes or extra mistakes you might make along the way. So that's that's super good. That's super good. Man, this has been so helpful and so wonderful and so good, Elizabeth. We are super excited for Slumber Sleepwear and all the things that you're doing. Where can they find more about Slumber Sleepwear? If I was like, man, I'd really like to go buy some, which is true, I probably am after we get off here. So my wife also probably needs some more PJs, so we'll do that. She would never say no to that.
Really? Oh, good. I hope she loves them. Yeah. Mm. Slumbersleepwear.com is where they can be purchased. And then we also do a good bit of posting on Instagram at the handle Slumber Sleepwear, and Facebook and LinkedIn. We do a couple business posts on LinkedIn. And I actually think we're on TikTok and Pinterest too. All Slumber Sleepwear.
All the way across the board. That's fantastic. Yeah. So go out there, world that is listening to our podcast, and go buy some more Slumber Sleepwear. You will fight the frump and have a wonderful night's sleep. So, man, Elizabeth, thanks for taking the time. Such a pleasure to have you. If you are a fan of the Daily Leader, which if you made it this far, you are, make sure you have liked, subscribed, tuned in, Instagram, TikTok. We're not on Pinterest, are we, Brad? That's probably best for everybody that we're not. YouTube, I think we are. So all the places. And with that, we will see y'all again next week.